Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today. This is the webinar by the COPS Office, the Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services, a component of the U.S. Department of Justice. And today we're going to be talking about recognizing and reporting hate crimes training for law enforcement agencies. My name is Nismia Comrie. I'm a sociologist here at the COPS Office, and I manage our CRITAC initiative, which is our Collaborative Reform Initiative Technical Assistance Center, as well as working on our portfolio of addressing hate crimes. I'd like to introduce my fellow panelists. If we could advance the slide. Yep. Chief, could you give a quick introduction of yourself?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Partee. I am the Chief of Police and Director of Public Safety at Lincoln University in Lincoln University, Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Chief. Hannah?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Hannah Annenson, and I am a project manager with the International Association of Chiefs of Police, and I work specifically on our CRITAC team.
Thank you, Hannah, and thank you, Chief. Before we get started with the conversation, I just want to kind of set kind of the stage for what we'll be doing over the next a little under an hour. The COPS office has been invested in supporting a portfolio of training and resources and technical assistance in addressing hate crimes. And what you're going to be learning a little bit about today is getting a glimpse into some of those resources, as well as some of the training and technical assistance we can provide through CRITAC. I encourage you to put in questions in the chat function and the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We'll be taking those questions and incorporating them into our conversation today. But really, I want to make sure that the reason why you're here today, you get those answers. And so please ask us those. Also, if you have any comments or feedback or anything that you're finding that works at your agency or in your community, again, please feel free to put them in the chat so that we can get to them. If we do not have time to get to all the questions, we will make sure to circle back with any emails or any information that we send out to everyone post this webinar. And then finally, we will be providing our contact information at the very end of this webinar. So with that, I'd really like to get started and really just dig into some of the questions. And Chief, I thought, we have a lot of different participants from all over the country. Majority are law enforcement, but I always like to just kind of level set. And so I'd like to turn to you before we start talking about some of the training. And if you could just kind of set the stage in the sense of what is a hate crime, and maybe kind of if you can give some examples just to get us started.
Okay, yeah, no problem. So basically, in its purest and most simplest form, a hate crime is a committed criminal offense that's motivated by bias against race, color, religion, national origin, sexual orientation, gender identity, or disability. And that's that definition will hold true no matter where you are. If you keep that definition in mind, and it won't convolute anything, and just keep that as basic as it is. So let's talk about some examples. I'll give you a disability example. So a group home for persons with psychiatric disabilities who were in transition back into the community was a site of a reported arson. Investigation revealed that neighbors had expressed many concerns about the group in town meetings and were angry that the house was located in their community. Shortly before the fire was reported, a witness heard a man state, "I'll get rid of those crazies. I'll burn them out." 12 persons, including patients and staff, suffered second and third degree burns. So you have your crime, and that crime was motivated in whole and in part by the status of those individuals, which was their disability. So it has to be one of those things that's included in those, and you can put any number of things in there. You can look at a gender scenario. A man entered a community college and shot and killed a female in a corridor. He then entered a classroom with 10 women and 48 men, fired a shot into the ceiling and said, "I want the women. I hate feminists." He sent all of the men from the room, lined the women up against the wall, and opened fire, killing 6 of the women and wounding the others. So that's a gender bias, and that motivated that crime.
Great. Thank you so much, Chief. So as you're talking about it, and as you're talking about some of the examples, I'd really like to talk about maybe some of the challenges in the terms of recognition and reporting, recognition and responding to hate crimes.
So the challenges can be broken down into two basic categories. You have your internal challenges, internal to the department, where you find officers sometimes don't want to change the way that they do things. And then you find your higher up in your chain of command that may not want to admit that they have an issue in their area with hate. You find that a lot of times with a lot of crimes where they want to paint a better picture than actually suggests. That hurts both the agency and the community. I was always taught, if you don't write it down and you don't report it, it didn't happen. And if it doesn't happen, then you find it becomes exacerbated, and then you have bigger issues. Whereas if you would have been proactive and taken care of it initially, then you may not have seen those issues as they escalated. So the external, you find a lot of populations that don't have a trust for the police and don't want to report. So underreporting and non-reporting are huge issues and huge challenges when it comes to hate crimes, because it gives individuals an out that don't want to admit that there is a problem. If they say, well, see, nobody's nobody's reporting it, then they can say, well, it doesn't exist, and we don't need the training to even learn how to properly recognize what's going on. So it's a matter of bringing in your community. And if you bring in your community and your community gives their buy-in, then your police find it a lot easier to actually report these things and don't feel like they are an outlier for pointing these things out.
Great, thank you. Hannah, I'd like to bring you in on this, to a couple pieces that the chief has talked about. First, I'd like to talk a little bit about the data, and I know the chief touched on that a little bit, but really kind of the importance of understanding the data and the ways that agencies should be utilizing that when we're addressing hate crimes.
Yeah, so just like with a lot of other crimes, the data is so important, whether that's tracking or just kind of monitoring the data and really understanding it and utilizing it to your agency's best of its ability. So as long as you're collecting accurate data relative to hate crimes, it can really help you kind of address those larger issues for your community, because it will give you some knowledge and some, I guess, data points to really help you identify any existing trends. So that can be, are these hate crimes or incidents taking places at the same time each day? Are they taking place within the same areas of your jurisdiction? It can also help you to identify different kind of characteristics of your offenders or your victims, anything along that line. And having that information can really help you to determine where you need to direct your resources, what adjustments you need to maybe make to your hate crimes operations, and things along those lines. Additionally, having this data will give you kind of a guideline for maybe where your offenders started and what level of hate crime you were at initially, and identify different escalation behaviors, things along those lines. It can also help guide you to better understand if there's a specific population within your community that maybe is being more targeted frequently or more prone to being victims. That way you can make sure that they are having the resources they need and kind of enhancing that community trust component with them based on that data. The last kind of point I'll say is data is also really crucial, not only internally, but externally. If you have data and you're transparent with that and share it with the community, that can really build that trust and enhance that collaboration between you and the community, which then will make them feel more comfortable reporting these hate crimes and coming to you when they're experiencing these types of situations, and really will let them see that your agency is taking this very seriously.
Thank you. And I also want to point out or bring you into the piece that the chief was talking about earlier about the buy-in with officers. And I want to see if there's anything else you want to add to that, about the importance of getting buy-in with the officers, but then also the chief was great about talking about external buy-in. So anything else you want to add on those pieces?
Yeah, so I think buy-in plays a huge part. If your officers aren't bought into the importance of recognizing and responding to these type of situations, then they might not handle them appropriately, or they might just kind of unfortunately slide them under the rug. So you want to make sure that you're educating them on this, that you're stressing the important internally as well as externally. Buy-in and building that community trust can be really hard. especially when it comes to hate crimes. So I think it's really important to make sure you're building that trust with the community ahead of any hate crimes or hate incidents. You don't want to wait until something bad has happened. You want to get out there and build that relationship ahead of time. That way, like I said a little bit ago, they're comfortable coming to the agency. They know you're going to respond appropriately and kind of do what you can to assist them and identify the offender. So buy-in both internally and externally plays a huge role. It can take a lot of steps to get that buy-in, but once you have it, it's so important to the overall process.
And it's so interesting, and I completely agree with what you said, because sometimes an agency may think that, okay, I've had a community meeting, now I have the buy-in, right? And I really like what you said, like, it's work, it's continuous work, because you have to continuously maintain that relationship, you have to continuously talk about it. And so I think that's a really important piece. And Chief, anything else you want to add to those, the data piece or the buy-in piece?
No, just being in a position previously in my career where reports were read and the staff review and you looked at it under UCR. There was a try to get away from, you know, whatever week it was. If you were looking bad in this part of the crime, you didn't want to look that bad. But it becomes important that every agency looks at the way that they report crimes as a part of their credibility. So whatever week that you try to hide crime is a week where you end up losing credibility with your community. And once you lose credibility with your community, you rarely get it back. So it's important that you are about the business of reporting factually what's going on in your community so that you can deal with it. It's a proactive response that every agency needs to be very much in tune with.
Great, thank you. And I know we've been talking a lot about hate crimes just to kind of start, but Chief, quickly, what is the value of reporting and tracking hate incidents?
So I touched on it a little bit earlier. You want to be proactive. You don't want to work from behind. Working from behind means that you may miss some things. And these are things that if they escalate into violence. The spray painting of swastikas on a synagogue could turn into violence against those individuals that attend a synagogue. Not acknowledging the fact that someone is throwing slurs at individuals who are coming out of a bar may down the road lead to an assault. So it's very important that you document what's going on in your area because you cannot deploy if you don't know what's going on. So a deployment that's based upon guesses is not a good deployment. You need a deployment that's based upon the factual reporting of crime.
Great, thank you. I want to turn to you, Hannah, from the victims and the survivors, and really the importance of using kind of a trauma-informed, victim-centered, and culturally responsive approach to working with victims and survivors of hate crimes. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I can't even begin to express how important it is to make sure that your officers are educated on a trauma-informed, victim-centered approach and that they're actually taking that approach. So when they're in these, incidents or cases where they're working with victims of hate crimes, these individuals have been through a lot. And the last thing that you want to do is re-victimize them or maybe unintentionally phrase a question or a statement in a way that's going to make them feel like you're blaming them for what happened. So by having the skills and techniques to take the trauma-informed approach, you'll make sure that these things are not taking place. Additionally, taking this approach can really help you to build rapport with the victims. It shows empathy and that you empathize with what they have gone through. And really, by doing that, you're going to open up kind of that discussion and have more of an open flow of information. And it can really help officers to collect additional information that maybe they wouldn't have been able to collect if they were not utilizing these approaches. I also think it's so important in these situations that our victims feel supported and like the agency is behind them and supporting them and understanding of what they went through. And just that kind of small little piece of support can actually increase their likelihood of staying involved in the criminal justice process and continuing to see through things for prosecution and things along those lines. If you look at it specific to officers, I guess another thing that's really important about the trauma-informed, victim-centered kind of approach is it's going to give your officers or you a better understanding of what the victim went through during the event or following the assault. And it's also going to potentially assist the victims in recalling details of the event that maybe they had initially blocked out. If you help them to feel more comfortable in your taking that victim-centered approach, it's going to potentially allow them to recall these events and share them with you because they have that comfort with you. So overall, like I said, I can't express how important these types of approaches are, not only because they can positively impact your investigation, but also they're really beneficial to the victim. They can diminish a lot of potential negative long-term impacts on the victim, previous victims, and even the community itself.
Great, thank you. So Chief, before we go on, I have a question from the chat that I'd like to address to you. And I'm going to broaden this just a little bit in the sense, if a hate crime has been committed by an officer, a police officer, what would your suggestion be to how to interact with that, especially if that's the police department that's in your jurisdiction?
So the first thing, it's important to follow the protocol that's set up by the department for reporting infractions by police officers. That's your first step. And if you don't get if you don't feel like you're getting the remedy there's always federal partners that will look into civil rights violations by law enforcement officers. I would first start with the internal affairs for your local police department. Make sure that that's reported to them. And then from there, if you don't feel like you've gotten a remedy, then reach out to the federal level to see if they can direct you in a manner that would deal with your issue. Nobody is above the law. Officers are human first, and if they infract, then they are to be dealt with in a manner of any other person that commits a crime.
Great, thank you. And to the person who put the question in the chat, we will provide links at the end of this to various resources. One of those is going to be the Department of Justice Hate Crimes website. On that website, there is information for, as the chief mentioned, different links so you'll be able to access both federal resources and the ways that reporting can occur. So we'll make sure that that link is provided at the end. So that way, if you do need that information, you have that. So. Great. So Chief, before we start moving to the conversation on the training, I do want to acknowledge the changes in the kind of the trends we've been seeing since October 7th. And in particular, with the rise in the mass demonstrations on college campuses. And so I do want to give you some space to talk a little bit about that, especially because you're in a unique role, because you are also on a college campus towards the end of the year. So I want to give you some space to talk a little bit about that.
So and it's no secret since October we have seen a marked uptick in hate crimes, whether it be anti-Muslim, anti-Semitic, and overall. California State did a study. It's a preliminary study that they've done in reference to the rise in hate crimes, and they've looked at it from the pandemic. Through the war and into the presidential race that we're about to go into, and it's rising every year. So what we need to do is, and I'm going to look at it from the law enforcement perspective, it's important that we hold on to our neutrality, as you will. When we see a crime, we report the crime. We can't take sides because that's not what we do. So it's very important that we make sure that we are very aware of our role and make sure that we are reporting these crimes overall so that we can detect and deter these issues before they exacerbate.
Thank you. Now I'm going to switch to the training. And for those of you that may have joined up a little bit later, if you have any questions or any comments, please feel free to put them in the chat. But for the rest of the time, we'll be talking about the training unless we get questions on the broader piece on hate crimes. So Hannah, I'd like to go to you first. If you could just provide an overview of the hate crimes recognition and reporting training and kind of introduce everyone that is listening to the training.
Yeah, thanks, Nasmia. So the hate crimes recognition and reporting training was created as part of a partnership with the COPS office and the CRITAC team within IACP. And this is an 8-hour training, which is essentially targeted towards uniform patrol officers, really with the goal of enhancing their response to and their ability to recognize and report hate crimes. The course has a lot of different components. We utilize traditional lectures, facilitated discussions. There's also some scenarios and case studies to kind of really open up discussions, have maybe some more real world type conversations. And the focus of these is not only to educate officers on that recognizing and reporting component, but we also want to kind of educate them on how to address the needs of victims, as well as how to build that community trust component, which I know we've talked about a little bit here today. I think really the key takeaways from this course are officers who attend this are going to learn not only what a hate crime is, but also a hate incident and be able to really differentiate between the two for the purpose of recognizing and reporting them. They're also going to get a background on some of the different historical events that are relevant to present day hate crimes and how they have kind of impacted where we are now with hate crime laws, legislature, things along those lines. They're also going to learn to compare, contrast, and identify the different protected classes who can be involved in hate crimes, since the victim piece of this is so important, like we've discussed. There's also a small component about offender types. That way they can know how to identify different types of offenders, how they might offend differently, what groups they could potentially belong to, things along those lines. And then lastly, there is a small component on conducting a preliminary investigation. That way these uniformed patrol officers kind of have the knowledge they need at that initial level to take care of all of these things. Like I mentioned, that is an 8-hour course, but in addition to the 8 hours, we also have a train the trainer component, which then makes it a 2-day, 16-hour course. For the train the trainer component, this really allows agencies to identify some of their trainers that they have to come learn from our national training cadre on the different adult learning theories, the different content and things along those lines. That way you can train this curriculum forward to your entire agency on your own. I think the biggest kind of thing that I'll throw in last about this training is I always want to inform people that this training is offered at no cost to agencies. So that's a big piece, simply through requesting it through CRITAC, which I'm sure we'll probably touch on a little bit later.
Great, thank you. Honey, don't go off on mute yet. It's almost one of the things that I found interesting when we were developing the training and then as we've been rolling out is that this training continues to evolve. And what are some of the lessons learned from the training on this topic that you can briefly touch on?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of lessons learned, I feel. I think the biggest thing that has stood out in developing this is really the lack of training out there and formal training relative to hate crimes. A lot of sworn personnel don't have the necessary tools to recognize, report, and respond to these types of crimes. So that was a really big thing that we kind of realized when creating this training, and something we really wanted to make sure that we were including to the level that it needed to be included. I also think it's important to note here that a lot of agencies also don't have policies relative to hate crimes and hate incidents, so they're not giving their officers these guidance. I think another piece that's really important is we've learned that this curriculum almost has to be a living, breathing document. Hate crimes is something that's always changing. There's always new groups who are going to be part of those victim classes. There's always different types of crimes that are going to be arising, and we need to make sure that as that's unfortunately progressing, that we're also being prepared to kind of handle it and train on it in our own. I think another big lessons learned is the uniform patrol officers play a very critical role when it comes to kind of this initial level of these preliminary hate crime investigations. They're the first person that's getting out there and being in contact with these victims from the law enforcement side. So how they handle these types of incidents is really going to shape the victim's view of law enforcement, how seriously they're going to take this, if they're going to empathize with them and have that understanding, and if they're going to tolerate these types of incidents. So I think that's an extremely important kind of component and something that we really try to address through this training curriculum by targeting it at those uniform patrol officer levels. And I know we've obviously mentioned data, such a big piece. Reporting can get you so much further. It can help with the community, help internal to your agency, things along those lines. And then another big lesson learned I would just kind of highlight is you want to make sure that you're having a strong investigative response to these. You want to aid the victim, calm the community, and really hold offenders accountable. You want to make sure that you, your agency, your personnel are not minimizing this because that can have such a larger ripple effect on everything else.
That's great. I'm going to bring in the chief in just a little bit, but before I do, because he also happens to be one of our national heroes, what are some of the things that Crytek looks for in determining the national hero?
Yeah, so we currently have a group of about 10 national trainers located across the country, and they all have some varying backgrounds. The biggest components that we really look for in these, and I'm not going to say that if you don't fit these perfectly, that doesn't mean we won't consider you. But the biggest thing is we want individuals who have experience or expertise relative to hate crimes, whether that's recognition, reporting, investigations, anything kind of along those lines, whether it's law enforcement related or in kind of a position where you're working alongside law enforcement. We have members of the cadre who are sworn professionals, members who are civilians. So either way, we are not going to count people out. I think another thing that's extremely important is we want people who are passionate about this topic area and who really want to kind of implement this change and help agencies improve their response, recognition, and reporting of hate crimes, since that's such a huge thing. The last kind of piece I'll throw out there is we want people who have experience training other law enforcement officers. You can't discount that. You don't want to send someone into the room who doesn't have that experience, doesn't understand those adult learning theories. So really that's kind of the final piece, I guess I would say. But again, like I said, if you're interested in becoming a national trainer, definitely reach out and we can talk through what that looks like and go over things more in depth.
Great, thank you. The chief, why do you want to be a national trainer?
So, training is my passion. Before my time here at Lincoln, I was the director of the academy and for Baltimore Police. So I've been training all of my career, and I mentioned before about my time in the staff review section of Baltimore Police Department, and I realized that officers didn't know that when they blew off one report, that threw the whole reporting off in terms of crime in an area. So anytime something comes up it's one of those situations where it will affect the outcomes of the community and the department, I'm all in. So when this came up and hate crimes to me is very important because people for years have been just throwing their hands up about these things, and we've seen the result where people have lost lives, and it's scarred communities. I'm really into community building and bridging the gap between the police and the community, and I realized that that gap is largely there because communities don't feel heard. And they don't feel heard when they try to make a report in reference to something that they believe has happened to them, and the officers don't take it seriously. So this was a no-brainer for me when they came to me with the opportunity. I was all in. Like I said, I love training. I love training police because it's such a challenge. The saying is that the only thing that police don't like more than change is the way things are. So you have to fix that. You have to figure that out. And this is a very important opportunity and subject to make sure that the officers are on board so that we can make changes in the communities that we serve.
That's great. Thank you, Chief. So I'd like to kind of, Chief, look to you to talk a little bit about your training approach and ways that you try to ensure that those officers are leaving with the skills that they can then apply and that they're not just leaving rolling their eyes thinking, yeah, this was another training that my chief sent me to that I had to be at.
So it's for me, the buy-in starts immediately. I put my credentials out there because credibility is huge with police. So it's important that they know that you've been out there, that you've done it, and you're not just in there talking about it. So that's the first thing. And once you get them there, then you show them the importance of how it can make their job a lot easier to be proactive than to be reactive. Uh, Reactive policing has been shown to not work, especially when it comes to bridging the gap between police and the community. Proactive partnerships that are in place start with being able to listen back and forth. So those communication channels have to be open, and the way that you open those is to build that from the beginning, and that happens in the classroom also. You let the officers know that, hey, if you don't agree with this, we can talk about it. I'll get you the information you need so that you can do your job better. And you put it out there to the officers. This is going to help you do your job better. It's going to help you to make your job easier. And most of the time they'll buy in. And then if they don't buy in, then you stay next to them the whole class and teach right next to them, and usually that makes them buy in. I'm joking, but it's very important that levity is also there. You don't want to stand in front of the class and just talk for 8 hours. We break them into groups. They do group work. They come up with their own solutions, their own ways to deal with certain scenarios. Scenario-based training is huge. We put a reality component in there when we do the training. And the good thing about it is this curriculum, and Hannah kind of touched on it, it breeds. It's very responsive to change. You can tailor it to fit whatever jurisdiction you're in. And that brings it home. I don't want to talk about things that happen in Maryland if I'm instructing in Illinois, because they're not going to connect with that. So you want to be able to make sure that you can have them connect with the information that you're putting out, and make it tailor fit to that area.
That's great. Yeah, I don't think any of us like having when the teacher would come up behind you at school and just stand there behind you. So I like the levity piece because I think it's so important. Um, so an agency goes through the training, chief. What would you say would be what would we call success? And I put that in quotes, right? And how could a chief say, or a sheriff or a director say that was a success, and we're doing things right in our recognition and our responsibility?
So once they go through the initial class, and I would hope that they would also go through the training, because outside voices don't aren't as loud as internal voices, and that internal credibility plays big. I can talk all day long and tell war stories about what I've done here, there, and everywhere, but the information, it just sounds a little bit better coming from somebody you actually know. So for a chief, um, if you hear officers talking about the training, and then you see a better product, then that's a success. You should be, as a chief, you should be looking, or as a upper command, you should be looking for those things. Uh, I would say that you should look at the training yourself, so that you know what to look for, to make sure that it's successful. If you don't know what's going on in upper command, you really can't say whether it's a success or not. You need to have your finger on the pulse. I'm not saying you should actually get out there and do it, but I'm saying you should know what your officers are learning so that you can talk to them about it, so that you can question them about it. Hey, what did you learn, or what do you think we can do better? And then you like I just pointed out, you should elicit that information from the rank and file, from the boots on the ground, from the officers that are taking the reports, so that things get better. It's one thing for me to come in and give them all of this information and say that these are the things, that these are the ways that are supposed to happen. But if that's not backed up and supported by the agency, then it rings hollow. So it's very important that whoever is championing this training actually has actually bought in themselves.
Thank you. Hannah, anything else you want to add to that question?
No, I think the chief did a great job there.
Great. So before we shift this topic, I do have a question from the chat that I'd like to bring up, and Hannah, I'll look to you for this one. The question is around the format of the training, if it's virtual, in person. And then the second part of the question is, which I think is going to kind of get into CRITAC, but the question is, if you've never done this before, what's the first step? So I'd ask you if you could talk a little bit about the format, and then I'm going to have you talk a little bit about CRITAC and the process, and then we'll get back to some of our other questions.
Yeah, sounds good. So, the format of this course is, like I mentioned, it's an 8-hour course or that 16-hour if you choose the train the trainer component. It is a fully in-person course and is one that we can actually bring to your agency with members of our national cadre, such as Chief Partee. I will state that kind of as part of the course, we do have pre-tests and post-tests to kind of test officers' knowledge at the start of the course as well as their knowledge at the end of the course to see kind of what was gained. There are videos as part of the course. There's scenarios. Our instructors, such as Chief Partee, kind of share their real life experiences, things along those lines, but it is all in person. And then for actually bringing this course to your agency, so like Nazmia and I have both mentioned, this course is through CRITAC in partnership with the COPS office. So CRITAC actually touches not only this topic area, but over 60 other different topic areas. And if you're looking for assistance or to receive this specific training, what you can do is you can simply submit a request to CRITAC through the COPS office website, which I'm sure we'll share the link for. And what you'll do is you'll fill out a form, you'll identify some different demographics about your agency, as well as the primary topic area that you're looking for assistance in. And then that will be passed along to the CRITAC team. And really that's your first step is submitting that request. And then we'll schedule a call with you to kind of talk through what's going to be most helpful, what kind of assistance we can provide, things along those lines. I will say that any assistance, not just this training that's provided through CRITAC, is no cost, and we are sponsored by the COPS office through federal funds. And we do service local, state, tribal, sheriff, and campus agencies all across the country. If anybody has any follow-up questions, let me know.
Great, thank you. So before we open up to some broader questions, Hannah, I'd like to turn to you again because we are currently developing another training, and although it's outside of CRITAC, I just like to see if you can talk a little bit about that and give everyone a kind of a sneak peek.
Yes, I will keep my sneak peek short and brief. But in addition to the hate crimes recognition and reporting, we are working currently to finalize the curriculum on a hate crimes investigations training. This is also another 8-hour course, and really it's building on the hate crimes recognition and reporting to dive a little bit deeper into the methods for investigating hate crimes and hate incidents. The target audience for this one's a little bit different. It's really anyone who has that investigatory responsibility. That word trips me up every time. So investigators, local prosecutors, really anyone who's going to be kind of pulling that investigative component of your agency or the work you do. Just kind of for some brief topics that are discussed. Majority of the course focuses on the basic steps and strategies for conducting hate crime investigations, but it also ties in components on supporting and advocating for victims and survivors, as well as that community engagement piece and outreach strategies that we've talked about a little bit today. That way your agencies are kind of equipped with that knowledge. There's also a component on how to work with your prosecutors when you get to that stage of the investigatory process as well. So like I mentioned, that one is still in the process of being finalized for the 8 hours, and eventually it'll also have a train the trainer component as well.
Great. So another question about CRITAC that I have for you, Hannah. Is there a minimum agency size?
No, there is not. It does not matter how small your agency is, how large it is. We take requests from anyone. I think the smallest agency that we worked with in the time I've been there had maybe 2 or 3 individuals, and only one of them was full-time. So it does not matter the size of your agency. We are more than happy to assist you. We can also, maybe you don't have hosting capabilities for this training. We can talk through other options. If you're a small agency and it makes more sense to send one person somewhere else, we can talk through that as options as well. The size doesn't matter. The jurisdiction size doesn't matter. Just if you're needing assistance, we're here to help.
Great, thank you. So with that, I'd really like to open it up to questions from the audience because I could probably spend hours here throwing questions at the chief and Hannah, but I really want to make sure that we're getting to questions from the audience. So I'll give everyone a couple of some time here to put something in. What questions do you have? And in the meantime, while I'm waiting to see if there's any questions that are going to come in, I'd like to see if each of you could just, if there's anything else that we didn't touch on that you thought would be important to share with the group.
I guess I'll go ahead and start. So I know this was touched on both by Chief and myself a few times, but I think we can't really express enough how important it is to make sure that if you don't have a policy in place relative to hate crimes and how you want your officers to kind of follow for guidelines when they investigate these type of courses or come across them, I encourage you to develop a policy. If you have one and maybe it's old, review it. That's also something that CRITAC can assist with. If you're not sure where to start on a policy, we're also here for that assistance. And then make sure your officers are trained up on this topic area. Give them the tools they need so there's no reason for them to not approach this the appropriate way and to not handle these types of incidents and crimes in the best manner possible. Chief?
No, you hit it on the head, Hannah.
Great. Well, we did get one new question in, and this is broader than training that we're talking about. The question is, are there virtual trainings or on-demand webinars available?
Yeah, so through CRITAC, you, like I said, in the topic area, we have a catalog of vendors and trainings in different topic areas. That being said, whatever an agency comes to us requesting, we're always happy to research and dive into different training options, whether those be in person, virtual, if you're looking for webinars that already exist out there, things along those lines. Any of that can be provided through CRITAC. It just will be something that we'll have to research and look into depending on the topic area.
Yeah, and the other thing I would add to that is we also here at the COPS office collaborate with all of our other DOJ components that are doing work in this space. We'll be sharing some information in a post email to all the participants from CRS, so Community Relations Services, the Civil Rights Division, Office of Justice Programs. All of these different components are doing work in this space, and we will coordinate with them if there's training out there that they're working on, if there are webinars. So please reach out to us because even if CRITAC and the COPS office may not be able to help you, we can always connect you with other components that are doing work in this space. And because I brought this up, I will talk a little bit about the couple of the websites that will be shared in the chat. So the Department of Justice does have a central repository of information, resources, events, information that you can find available across the DOJ components and all the work that they're doing. And that's justice.gov/hate crimes. It's great. You can go there. You could see, you can put in your state. You can see state information. You can see case studies. You can see resources. So I encourage you that if you are working in this space, even if you're not law enforcement, I encourage you to go to that website because you'll also be able to see the resources broken out by different audiences. You'll also see different information in different languages. And so I encourage you to look at that. I also encourage you to look to these other components that do work in this space at the Department of Justice. There's a lot of grant funding from the grant components. So the COPS office does funding in the space, as well as Office of Justice programs. In particular, Bureau of Justice, BJA, and Office of Juvenile Justice Delinquency Prevention, as well as the Office for Victims of Crime. So I know I referenced a lot of different components. The great thing is that if you go to the hate crimes website that the DOJ has, you'll be able to see all of the various funding streams and who is eligible, who is not for those funding opportunities. In addition, there is a lot of training and resources and mediation services available through CRS, Community Relations Services. And so again, we will provide that information, but I strongly encourage you to look at our website, which again, you'll be able to find through the DOJ Hate Crimes website. So there's a lot of really great information out there. One thing I want to say is sometimes it can be overwhelming. So if you do need assistance in kind of navigating that, I encourage you to reach out. And we're always happy to assist in connecting you in the best way possible. So I just want to thank you all so much for joining the presentation today. Chief and Hannah, I really want to thank you for joining the panel and having this conversation. And if you have further questions, I encourage you to reach out. Our contact information is here. We will also send a follow-up email with further resources as well that we'll be able to answer. So with that, thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful and safe day.